Hello guys, your crazy coach lady, and welcome to this section of our little chaos course correction session here. I'm super excited to move on with you guys. So far we have talked about the fight versus flight mechanisms that our ancestors used to use and how they did it so well in a way that served us. Next we went over our fight mechanism and how we get stuck in that and exactly how to pull away from that so we can move into a better state of mind and body. And today we're going to be talking all about the opposite side of that, which is our flight mechanism, which so many of us again get stuck in and actually pull away from the purpose that this survival mechanism is doing in our life. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it and chat a little bit about the flight mechanism in our life. Now, when it comes to all of this, when it comes to this survival message, what's happening here is our central nervous system and our SNS response is to protect us. Like we've spoken about many times before, this is our brain jumping into action to make things happen so that we are protected. So once again, if you get stuck in a flight mechanism, a flight coping mechanism, where you're fleeing from, where you're isolating within, where you're soaking in your pain and absorbing it yourself by yourself and really feeling the weight of this is completely and totally normal, and it's not something for you to shame yourself over, but it is something for you to learn a little bit more about so that you're not constantly stuck in this and you can begin to balance the fight and the flight together so it actually begins to serve you. So what happens here when we're experiencing this flight syndrome of this survival mechanism is that we're actually in a mode of this survival technique where we're trying to flee from a perceived threat or enemy. And so our brain is doing its best job to say, whoa, danger, whoa, enemy, whoa, threat. We're perceiving this in our mind and we're trying to distance ourselves away from this in order to protect ourselves fully and make sure that no further harm is being done. But as this happens, excess hormones again cause so many other issues here that begin to move us in a direction that we don't actually want to be moved into, because now we begin to feel uncomfortable and out of control. But as your body is trying to prioritize what's important here, things get a little bit out of whack. And the functions that are needed, like the rapid heartbeat or the isolation, those things begin to take priority in your brain, and you begin to lose the rationale and the common sense that you need to make the proper decision or to move away from your panic. So you feel quite literally, in this sense, completely isolated, completely alone, and completely stuck within your own body. And this is completely typical, but as this begins to grow, you begin to inherit even further panic because of this response, because of this flight mechanism. And so when we do this causes severe trauma to the smallest of situations. All of a sudden, what was a normal situation, an everyday situation, or something a little bit scary like public speaking or making a new friend or something like this, begins to be coded in your subconscious as an absolute trauma, to where now when we move through a similar situation where our body is responding in the same way, we actually lose the ability to move through it because of the subconscious program that has coded us as needing to flee from this particular enemy, as perceiving this threat and needing to back away. And so this in total creates this cycle, this pattern of living of complete disconnection from things that may be scary but could be really good for us, or complete disconnection to ourselves and the world around us. A huge damper with all of this is when we become disconnected from ourselves and the world around us. It really adds up a level of insecurity and lack of security in our own body. And as you've heard me talk about so many times before, our body is a sacred space, something that should be safe and comforting to us. And the more trauma or chaos that we have standing in the way of the connection between our body and the world, and our body, our soul, our mind, the further down this road we are going, which is actually preventing us from growing. So we want to take away these symptoms, and we want to move towards a way of living that we are not so affected by the small or large traumas in our lives, and that when they come up, we can begin to move through them. Because the reality of the situation is that life isn't perfect, and no matter how dedicated to personal development or growth, there are going to be real life examples that pop up that you have absolutely no control over. And I think there's absolutely no better time than right now to understand and learn how to handle your own flight mechanism so it begins to serve you rather than hurt you even when it's trying to protect you. So we no longer want to stay isolated. We no longer want to stay depressed. We no longer want to seek all of this pain for ourselves and have this unending cycle of pressure and suffering. We want to take a second away from this and really pull out of it. And so again, with the same mechanisms that we talked about in fight method, we can use these exact same coping mechanisms to move us away from this flight mechanism and balance back out. So here's something that I want to mention here, and it is important. In the day and age that we live in now, so much of our time and our energy is spent selfishly. And I don't disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. I 100% think that you should have a self-focused attitude to life, or self-focused attitude approach to life. I really think this is positive for you. Although so many of my videos and my coaching, I teach about how it's important to have gratitude and to give back, to be a part of, to make sure that you have some sort of service commitment. In the exact same notion of being a part of and giving back, we need to approach life itself with a self-focused attitude. When we approach life itself with this self-focused attitude, we become more in control of what we flee from or what we fight from, and we begin to take things to a deeper meaning, something that can actually serve us well rather than cause us to run from or follow the masses because of panic or anything like that. And so as you're moving on to the coping mechanisms here when it comes to dealing with flight, I want you to take that approach, a self-focused attitude approach, where it's not about them and it's not about the world and it's really not about the situation itself, but it's about you and your specific life, your specific desires, your specific pain, and exactly how you're going to choose to react to any given situation. So again, just like with fight, it is so super duper important to become aware to the symptoms that you are experiencing so you can choose to manifest a positive light of creation and protection and transcendence around your individual crisis. Again, second step of this is, of course, for me, always 100% breathing. You need to be able to center yourself in the midst of any crisis so you can move forward and get a deeper awareness to exactly what's going on. And so I have made a quick video for you guys on a few different breathing techniques that have worked so well for me, my clients, and my children that can get you to this central step. Next, third step, same thing, is the thought tracking technique, where you're identifying what you're feeling, why it is existing, you're breaking it down into a few different areas, and then you're moving forward with a positive opposite affirmation and a positive opposite action, both in the now and in the future. Awareness, breathing, and thought tracking, these are super duper simple things, but they will be used in your daily life 100% of the time, and the more that we use them in our daily life, the more habitual it becomes to use them in crisis because it's such a habit for you. So it comes to any time or moment that you want to flee, any time or moment that you want to fight, your brain will begin to automatically do this awareness, this breathing, and this thought tracking to move you naturally through it without any real need of your own. The next thing that's specifically so important for the flight mechanism is our cognitive distortions. We are facing on a daily basis a number of cognitive distortions or thinking distortions or incorrect thinking patterns, however you want to go about it. Cognitive distortions is exactly like its name states. Thought, wrong. thought wrong. They're different types of patterns of our thinking that are completely incorrect. They're over-dramatized or they're under-dramatized. They're highlighting the negative and disqualifying the positive. They're taking everything so selfishly and forgetting to look out in the mixed. It's looking at everything in the mix and forgetting to look at the selfish aspect of things. It's all about the thinking patterns that you live in on a daily basis that have actually created this bottom line of pressure, anxiety, and stress that has existed. When we get into a mode of crisis, when we're in a bit of chaos, these cognitive distortions scream and speak louder than anything else. And all of a sudden, we begin to really lean into these cognitive distortions and begin to feel them and believe them as truth. And so many of us, again, do this every single day in our daily life, in the way that we interact with the world and the way that we interact with ourselves. So cognitive distortions are everywhere, and I do have a quick video for you that explains them a little deeper, but a simple Google search will tell you the 5, the 10, the 7 different cognitive distortions that are so super duper common for us. And just by simply looking at one of those graphics, you can identify yourself exactly what 3, 4, 5, 10 cognitive distortions that you live in a daily basis and how it interacts in your life. When you begin to become aware of how distorted your thinking actually is, you begin to have that awareness where you can choose a different line of thinking and you can get back to the baseline of truth. When you get back to the baseline of truth, you balance yourself out and you move towards to where you're not flying and you're not fighting, but you're finding yourself in a baseline of truth that allows you to actually move forward with rationality rather than with fear. The last thing that I want to say here is all about action. Your action when it comes to the flight mechanism is so super duper important because so much of our fleeing mechanism actually means fleeing inward and resorting to isolation, depression, and complete distancing from the world around us and from our center's true core needs and desires. And so when it comes to moving away from this crisis mode, this chaos mode of flight, we need to make sure that we are taking that hard action that we don't necessarily want to take. That doesn't mean we have to go out and we have to sign up for every public speech and get our voice out there, but it does mean that we have to begin to live in a way that is actually aligned to the desires that we have rather than aligned to the fear that we're dealing with. We have to begin to live in a way that we are taking action that aligns with the desires we have, not the fear that we are living in. So many of us day to day live in our fears rather than living in our desires. And when we're living in our fears, we're still taking action, but we're taking the action to solidify those fears, to make those fears even more true for us. And so when it comes to stepping away from this flight mechanism, it's so important to make sure that you are taking the action that actually aligns you with your deepest desires. And part of this is understanding your philosophy to motivation, your philosophy to life, and your philosophy to the standpoints that you hold within your life. Because as you begin this personal development journey, even just this small section of correcting chaos in your life, what you'll begin to see is that you are dealing with so much more than just a crisis of anxiety or a crisis of stress or pressure, but that these crises, this chaos that you're dealing with actually weeds way back into your psyche as far as what you believe, what you desire, and how you go about living. So I have also two videos out there for you called Motivation is Shit and Raising Your Standards, and these were 2 videos that absolutely changed my life. So when it comes to applying action in your life in order to move you away from the flight mechanism, I want you to take a look at these videos and really begin to believe these things in your life and see how they can shift you from living in your fear to living in your desires. That's all I have for this video. We'll see you on the next one.